I spent over 1,000 hours inside real corporate environments during internal pen tests in 2025. Most breaches don't start with 0 days, custom malware, or elite level hackers. They start with mistakes. My name is Spencer Alessi. I'm an internal pen tester at Secure IT 360 and a Microsoft MVP in security, identity, and access. And in this video, I'm breaking down the most common IT security mistakes that I see over and over again. So I've been on the inside of organizations of all sizes and industries, and there's no way that I can list every mistake. So I've organized these into 5 different patterns. Pattern or theme number 1 is identity debt. Identity and access is kind of near and dear to me, being an AD security guy, but I do believe that, my bias is warranted in a way, and I do believe that identity is the number 1 attack surface. One of the examples and what this looks like is using the same account for daily work and for admin work. If you click on a link, or you go to a website, or you download a file, or you're looking at a resume, or whatever the case may be, you could inadvertently infect your computer. And now potentially that threat actor or that malware has access to a machine where you've used those administrative credentials and they can steal them. Another example of this identity debt is MFA not being strictly enforced. So this is not only for admin accounts, but also for regular user accounts, which are kind of most impacted here. We've seen this kind of cycle repeat over and over and over again, where user gets compromised, they don't have MFA, there's some sort of RDP or VPN access on the internet, and now the threat actor is able to get in and kind of further compromise the environment. Another area where I see this identity debt kind of crop up is overprivileging of accounts. I've seen this affect admin accounts, service accounts, but also regular user accounts. Kind of the most gross kind of violation of this is with file shares. With document repositories, with document management systems, especially in the legal vertical, where everybody just has access to everything. The difficult part here, particularly with accounts and access, is in many systems, unless you're using like a just-in-time thing or privilege access management solution where it takes the privileges back out, those privileges stay. So if you give permissions on an OU, or you give users permission to a share or a document management system, the thing is that debt doesn't disappear, right? Like, it just doesn't automatically get removed. Really, it's the exact opposite, is those issues just compound and compound and compound. And then what ends up happening is you have these like spider web cracks in your environment, which end up making like attack paths where you have all these distinct kind of paths to attack the environment. And then it becomes really unruly and really difficult to manage and kind of clean that up. A huge reason these failures exist is operational overhead. Too many tools, not enough time, too much context switching. That's why platforms that reduce friction for IT and streamline IT operations matters so much. Quick shout out to Ninja One for sponsoring this video. Ninja One supports educational content like this because they understand the reality of IT work. If your current IT operations have you overwhelmed, or you're looking to make a change, you can check them out at ninja1.com or use the link in the description. Now back to the video. So pattern number 2, or theme number 2, is visibility and detection gaps. So this is something I hear from time to time, and it usually always makes me smile. And it's the saying of, we know if we were compromised. And the reason this makes me smile is because I do pen tests all the time. Like, that's what I do, internal pen testing over and over and over again. And I run many of the same techniques in every environment, and the results can vary quite drastically. But one of the common themes is that the organizations, the teams that are overconfident, they're detecting not as much as they think they are. In this theme, this visibility detection gap theme, there's a couple of things I want to point out. One, logging itself is either not enabled or it's not sufficient. The other is logs that are not preserved enough. So I found out that this is a very common thing with EDR providers, in that if that event doesn't create an alert, or there's no detection, or it's not part of like a case or something like that, then the retention period is different. And let's say you have an incident, you're trying to detect some suspicious activity. Well, you're not going to just look at alerts, right? You want to look at the timeline, what happened on the endpoint, like, is there anything around that time that was happening? And you might not have that data to go back to. So it's something to think about, and that's a very big visibility detection gap that I don't see a lot of people talking about. The next thing in this theme is alerts are not triaged properly. So many times, because of the clients that I work with, they have a outsourced SOC or an MSP or an MDR provider. And unfortunately, what I see is the SOC will respond to a pattern of suspicious activity, right? Calling out a couple things that happened. And there'll be a disconnect between what the client expects to happen and what the SOC or the MDR provider does. So for example, I was doing an internal pen test and I created quite a bit of noise. I was running a lot of suspicious things. The SOC did a good job. They reached out to the client. They're like, hey, we see this activity. But instead of taking action on it directly, they asked the client what they wanted to do. And then the client was kind of confused because the client thought that the SOC was going to immediately take action and kind of address it as they see it. So it was kind of a communication disconnect. There was a misunderstanding of responsibilities there. And that's something I see quite often. So pattern number 3 is vulnerability and patch misconceptions. Patching is important. Vulnerability management is important. Those are foundational aspects of IT security, but many times the way it's done actually creates more risk or leaves risk on the table that shouldn't be there otherwise. And kind of the first mistake in this pattern is trying to patch everything. So this is maybe a contentious thing to say, but I do believe it's true in that 99% of vulnerabilities don't matter. It's really the 1% that you really have to worry about. The hard part is kind of knowing what that 1% is, right? You don't really know which vulnerability is going to kind of take off and be the next Log4j. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I see a lot of folks spending a lot of time trying to get to zero, trying to patch thousands of vulnerabilities. It kind of takes their eye off the ball. It kind of takes away from the time that they should be spending on the more important risks, the more important vulnerabilities in their environment. So quick stat to kind of make this all make sense. In 2025, there were roughly 130 new CVEs tracked every day. So 130 new vulnerabilities tracked in like the CVE database every single day of 2025. It's like that. I think that's ended up being like 49, 50,000 vulnerabilities for the year, something like that, which is crazy, right? There's no way to keep track of all that. There's no way to patch all of that. So the solution there is you have to focus on what matters. And that means you have to find systems or develop systems that kind of help you hone in on what is important and what to focus on. The other area here that I see as being an issue in this pattern is moving too slowly, especially for internet-facing kind of edge devices. So if there's any capability that I think is one of the most important going into 2026 and kind of just going forward, it's the systems and processes you have for patching the most serious and kind of most exposed assets, your edge devices, VPN, remote access, anything that is external. You have to have a process in place to address vulnerabilities as they come up as quickly as possible. Another stat that I pulled for this video is in 2024, Cloudflare observed an attacker deploying a TeamCity POC exploit in 22 minutes after the POC was exploited online. It's just crazy. 22 minutes after a public POC was released online. And, not to make this an AI episode or anything like that, but I believe that AI is just going to make the time to exploit even shorter. It's going to be even more difficult. So it's even more important for defenders to really understand how they can patch those systems as quick as possible. The next section is recovery fumbles. So I tried to be funny with this, I guess, and bring a sports reference into this. So imagine you're playing a football game, you get the handoff, right? And you're about to score a touchdown, but then you drop the ball at the last second or the defender strips it out of your hand, right? This is kind of how it is with backup and recovery, in my opinion. I see a lot of organizations and IT teams are doing a lot of work. They spend a lot of money on Veeam or their immutable backups, but then they don't test their backups. They don't test if they can pull data from them. They don't test the recovery process. They don't have, roles and responsibilities. They don't have a plan for using those backups or going through the recovery process. One of the most important things is once you've got your backups and you've got your procedure, you've got to test it. You've got to actually do the restores. You've got to document the process for it because if you're the kind of the owner of the backup and recovery process, if you get hit by a bus, you're on vacation, you're unavailable, other people on the IT team or at the organization need to be able to recover in your absence, right? So one of the worst things you can do is if you own this process is to keep all the information in your head. Your recovery procedures only exist if they're tested and validated and documented. That's crucially important. And really without backups, without recovery, none of this other security stuff really even matters. So pattern number 5, lack of ownership and tunnel vision. Admittedly, I think this is maybe the most difficult area to overcome and kind of to fix because a lot of this stuff is just human nature. It's working against kind of the way things have always been done and culture and kind of the human traits and skills and aspects of security and IT. It's always the human aspect of IT and security that's the most difficult to change. One of the common mistakes I see, especially with large organizations that have big IT teams, we do an internal pen test, we go through and we're like, hey, we've got all these findings. They're like, okay, cool, we're going to go fix them. And then we come back maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months later, and only like half of them are fixed, or they're still struggling to work on them or find bandwidth for them. And one of the most likely causes of that is lack of ownership, kind of responsibility of those. We have findings, we know the remediation, we know how to fix them, but IT people and kind of the teammates were never assigned responsibility for those things to kind of follow up and track those and work on those. Kind of along with that is deadlines. So once you have somebody that has ownership of something, if there's no deadline for it, if you could just kick the can down the road, most of the time it's not going to be fixed. Another issue that I see here is fixing the same issue over and over and over again, which kind of points to root cause, right? We're not finding the root cause of the issue. We're kind of just addressing these things whack-a-mole style as they pop up and kind of putting band-aids on them, rather than taking the time to understand the full breadth of the issue. And, we try to do this as much as possible during our internal pen tests and all of our other pen tests is like, let's try to figure out what the root cause here. But many times we're also not able to identify the root cause, right? We don't know the environment. We're not in it day in, day out. We don't know the historical context. So many times a pen tester isn't able to determine what the root cause is. And that really comes down to the IT team. They have to take ownership of that to try and figure that out so that those mistakes don't crop up again. So what do you do about this? Where is the advice in all of this complaining by me and kind of pointing out the flaws and the mistakes, right? This is what I kind of hope you take away from it. One is inconsistent operational discipline has a compounding effect on security. And you have to know that it doesn't self-resolve, right? These compounding issues, they don't fix themselves. You have to fix them. Two is if it's not tested and if it's not validated, it becomes an assumption. And assumptions create blind spots. And in my opinion, when it comes to the things that matter, eliminating as many assumptions as possible is critically important. Do this by documenting, testing, validating, communicating, and doing this over and over and over again and getting really, really good at it. Three is risk isn't just about how many vulnerabilities there are. The game is figuring out which ones are important, then spending most of your time on those things. Four is security doesn't exist without ownership. Data needs owners, assets need owners, pen test findings need owners, and breaches don't happen because defenders lack tools. They happen because assumptions go unchallenged, ownership is unclear, and the risks are just misunderstood. So if any of this felt uncomfortable, no, you're not alone. Many people watching this video, myself included, all struggle with this, and all IT and security professionals struggle with these same issues. This video isn't really a demand or an expectation to be perfect. It's really a plea and a reflection on the common mistakes that are made in IT security and cybersecurity. Hope this conversation has helped kind of stoke some of those ideas in your head to help you improve. I'm a big believer that small, consistent improvements over time make for really, really big progress in the end. If you found this video useful or helpful or insightful in any way, subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Let me know which one of these you have advice on and how you kind of tackle some of these mistakes yourself. I would love to hear other people's opinions to help spread the word on what helps organizations be more secure. All right, so with that, we'll see you in the next video.